My name is Palmer McKay. I am interviewing Vietnam veteran Ken Pervis, who served in the Marines and was in Vietnam from 1968 to 1969. Mr. Pervis, this interview will have 4 sections: your life before service, basic training, your time in Vietnam, and your life after service. Let's get started with your background. Where did you grow up, and what was your area known for?
Grew up in Aiken, South Carolina, near Aiken High School.
What's Aiken known for?
Horses primarily. Used to be a lot of polo, still some polo, but when I grew up it was primarily flat track races and polo. That was about, the city Aiken was basically that.
Can you tell me about your family growing up?
Yeah, I was the oldest child of 3. I have a sister 16 months younger, who's a retired school teacher here, and I had a brother 12 years younger. My father died when I was in the 10th grade, and I was the oldest child, so I drove a school bus and worked at Aiken Drug.
Would you describe your dad's job as blue collar or white collar when he was alive?
All of the above. He was a county deputy sheriff for a while. He ran a pawn shop for a while. He was an insurance agent. He sold used cars. Pretty well all of it. Whatever it took to make a living, basically.
Did your mom work after your father passed away?
Part-time, but not full-time.
Do you have any memories of your father or other men around you telling war stories from World War II?
No. The veterans I knew came back, they basically said nothing about the war. I knew some of them acted strange, but I didn't know what it was. But looking back on it, it was PTSD. Had an uncle that suffered pretty badly from PTSD, but back then we didn't even know what it was. Called it shell shock.
Did your dad serve in World War II?
Did not. He always said he was too young for World War I and too old for World War II or something like that. But anyhow, no, he did not serve.
Did you have a favorite World War II movie growing up?
A bunch of them. Glorified war. But yeah, I used to enjoy watching them. There was one about Rommel in Africa that I used to enjoy watching.
A lot of Vietnam veteran memoirs mention John Wayne as an influence on their expectations of war. Do you remember John Wayne that way?
Oh yeah, same thing. Yeah, it was kind of a hero thing, and back then it was common to see troops marching in the street, parades and stuff like that, and I always thought the uniforms looked pretty neat, as a child would, but really never thought about joining the military until I was in high school probably, and war was going on and the draft was wide open, and either had to get married, go to college, or get drafted, or you could, like I just enlisted. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I learned a lot that I didn't want to do after serving in the Marine Corps, but it helped focus what I want to do later in life.
Did you play war as a kid?
Yeah, we did. Had the little soldiers that were about 3 inches tall, and we'd have battles, but I hadn't thought about that in a long time.
Now, I'd like to move on to the start of your service and basic training.
Okay.
Historians of the Vietnam War note that in addition to volunteering, being commissioned, and being drafted, there were also draft-motivated volunteers. How would you describe yourself?
Probably draft-motivated volunteer. I didn't want to get drafted. I'd known some people who got drafted, and most of us were going to Vietnam some kind of way, and I did not want to go with some of that crowd.
When you enlisted, did you expect to go to Vietnam?
Yeah. basically, if you joined the Marine Corps, you were going to Vietnam. If you didn't, it was a rare exception. You might get embassy duty or something like that, but you basically going to Vietnam.
When you enlisted in the Marines, did you enlist trying to avoid the Army?
Yeah, that'd be fair. It was, you know, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. So I had a friend who joined the Marine Corps, and I guess he was some motivation. I guess part of it was my lack of knowledge, but it was, you know, I thought the Marine Corps uniform looked good, the dress blues, but, and I never had any. But I always thought if you go and just go with the crowd that probably knew better what they were doing than the others, but that's basically why I joined the Marine Corps, I guess.
How old were you when you enlisted?
18.
What, if anything, did you know about the country of Vietnam before you enlisted?
I'd seen pictures, and there was, when I was in high school, it was a Marine who had graduated from Aiken High, came back and taught to our history class, it seems like. And you know, I associate with rice paddies and that kind of terrain, which is, there was rice paddies, but where I spent most of my time, there weren't any rice paddies. But really didn't know anything about the country other than what I'd seen or heard.
What did you know about the Vietnam War?
That was very unpopular. I thought I was one of these people who were motivated by and believed what politicians were saying, the domino theory, Vietnam goes, the rest of Southeast Asia, and we've learned since then that was not the facts.
How would you describe your boot camp experience?
Challenging. I was in pretty good physical condition, but I didn't realize it was going to be to that extent. I mean, I could run and ran and it was that kind of stuff, but I think the harassment was the thing that stands out in my mind. It was almost constant harassment. We were never left alone. There was a DI with us 24/7. And there was a right way to eat, a wrong way to eat, a right way to walk, a right way to sit, a right way. And if it wasn't the right way, it was obviously the wrong way, and there were consequences. But I thought the DIs, one DI was fair, the other one was a psycho. I mean, truly. He should have never been in that role.
Can you elaborate a little bit?
He physically abused recruits. I never understood how beating a person got them to comply. I always hoped I'd never see him again. In fact, the morning I left Paris on, he stuck out his hand and told me, you'll be a fine Marine, Pervis, and I wouldn't shake his hand. I'm glad I never saw him again.
Were there any other abuses besides beating?
Yeah. Most of it had to do with harassment. I mean, I didn't see anybody pushed off of steps or something like that. It'd be stuff that you wouldn't physically normally see, but grabbing people in the throat and that kind of stuff, it was incredibly painful, and I never could understand what the real purpose was.
How would you describe the people you trained with in terms of race?
There were roughly 75 people picked up from my platoon. They call it picked up, that we put in the same platoon. And I think there were 37 of us that graduated out of that 75. Some of them got hurt. Some of them got recycled. Some of them broke mentally. And the racial mix-up changed over, depending on what stage you're in. But there weren't many blacks. There were probably, I'd say, maybe 10% at the most. That was my first exposure to Hispanic, Spanish-speaking. They spoke English, but I mean Hispanic troops was my first experience with that. But so there were blacks there, but not a large percentage.
I definitely want to come back to this, but can you talk more about people breaking in basic training? What did that look like?
Mentally breaking. Some physically break. I mean, break a shoulder or something like that. There's a lot of physical things that you could seriously get hurt doing. But I remember one instance particularly, the lights were supposed to be off at 10 o'clock, 2,200 hours. And this one guy, they'd singled him out, I don't even know why he was there, and wanted him to do pull-ups. And he couldn't reach the bar. And with a flashlight, the DI just kept saying, jump, 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 jump. And in the middle of the night, the lights all come on, the corpsmen come in and haul him out. He just broke mentally. Was not a good thing to see, but it happened. I would like to think it doesn't happen anymore. The guy should have never been there. He wasn't tall enough to reach the pull-up bar. And we had another, a black recruit who couldn't read and write. And he should have never been there. I mean, that just made no sense. And they harassed him enough, they finally just, I don't know what happened to him.
To revisit race a little bit, growing up in Aiken, was boot camp your first experience in an integrated institution? Pretty
much, yes. I think my class was the last class. I graduated in 1966. There were blacks on campus, but there were no blacks in my graduating class that I remember. So it was very segregated.
And how would you describe racial tensions in boot camp?
There basically weren't any. I remember one time I was totally out of water and we were doing something, I couldn't even spit, it was so dry. And I was there in the summer, so it was incredibly hot at Parris Island. And a black guy beside me offered me a canteen. And I'd never experienced that. It built a lot of relationships.
You mentioned off camera being at Parris Island during the riots in LA.
Mm-hmm.
Did that shape racial tensions in any way?
We couldn't really communicate with other recruits. You could just observe that they knew it had happened. Occasionally you would see a newspaper, it was very rare, and you saw no TV. But it was known that the race riots were going on. And you could see there was some friction. I guess I felt it more than saw it, but you could tell there was friction there on both sides.
Did anyone around you struggle with boot camp?
Yeah, a lot of them struggled. That's the reason that only about 37 of the original 75 graduated. A fair number just washed out physically, they couldn't do it. A fair number washed out mentally, they couldn't do it. And then a sizable percentage was recycled. They weren't up to expectations, so they didn't. If you couldn't do so many sit-ups or so many squat thrusts, you got recycled.
You mentioned when we spoke off camera that you set up barricades at the Pentagon in 1967. Was that for the famous March on the Pentagon?
It was.
What do you remember from that night?
I was stationed at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. I was there for a 10-week school to train to be a topographic surveyor. And I don't know why they did this, but they came and took the Marines off the base, and we went to the Pentagon to put up barricades and string wire and ropes, that kind of stuff. In preparation for the march. So we went up to that evening, it was incredibly cold, as I remember, and there was no provisions made for food or anything else. We worked all night long, and as the daylight broke, the 82nd Airborne came in with a convoy. But I never could figure out why they just took the Marines off that base to go do that work. But we did. So I wasn't actually involved during the race, or during the March on Washington, but I saw it building up. So I left before it actually began.
I'd like to move on to your time in Vietnam. Did anything stick out about your flight to Vietnam?
Yeah. I left Cherry Point, North Carolina. There were 20 of us on special TAD, we called it temporary additional duty. We were going to Vietnam for 4 months to put in high order surveying control. The maps were poor, basically they were old French maps. So we were doing high order, meaning accurate type surveying at that time. So 20 of us got on a C-130 airplane, which is a 4-engine prop, but seats that aren't seats, they just swings like they got straps in them, like if you've seen some of the new movies as special ops people. And we flew to California, stayed a couple of days in California, flew to Hawaii, spent one night, and then the next day we flew to Midway, Wake, and Guam, and the next day flew to Da Nang, Vietnam, all on that C-130. We changed planes and changed C-130s in, I think, Hawaii. But I figured out one time, we were about 49 hours flying altogether in a C-130, which I would not recommend.
Wow.
Long, long ride. And then we got on the airport there in Da Nang, and obviously there was a war situation going on. It was reinforced bunkers, blah, blah, blah. And then it was pastel-colored aircraft coming in, Braniff and other airlines. Braniff doesn't exist anymore. Pastel-colored airliners coming in, bringing in troops. And I always just thought it was so bizarre. You got a pastel-colored airplane flying into a war zone. But that was typical Vietnam. You saw really weird things.
What month did you arrive in 1968?
January, right before. I think we left, like January, the Super Bowl Sunday was playing when we left Hawaii. So I think that's January 14th, I think, in Vietnam, a few days later.
Could you describe your first 24 to 48 hours in country?
Was attached to 11th Marines for a while, and it was TED 68 was going on, so we were spending nights in foxholes and listening posts and that kind of stuff. And at the same time, there was a USO show going on at Freedom Hill, which just, here again, just seems so bizarre that you got mines in the roads and there's a US show going on with Anne Margaret. I don't know if she was there right then, but at Freedom Hill, I could hear the music and we were in bunkers. Just crazy stuff.
What did you expect when you arrived based on TV or stories you had heard?
I don't know if I expected anything. We had not gone through any kind of training specific to go to Vietnam since we were going over temporary additional duty. The second time I went back, they actually sent you through staging to get you ready to go to Vietnam, which I thought was interesting. Since I'd already been, I get to go the second time and learn how to go. Here again, must make sense to someone. It didn't to me.
Could you tell me more about experiencing the Tet Offensive?
Yeah, it was, I guess the main thing was going on, we had, when I say we, the Marine Corps had allowed Vietnamese people to work like in the mess hall and in the rear areas, in the more secured areas. And after Tet, or during Tet, all of a sudden they started disappearing. And in case, one time I had my hair cut and a shave. I was in a 155 gun battery at Phu Bai, just out of Way. Still had Vietnamese in there. Guy cut my hair and shaved me, and that night we killed him for shooting mortars at us, which I always thought was interesting, that he shaved me and cut my hair, and that night we killed him. I personally didn't kill him, but found his body. But so you got to learn real quick, you couldn't trust who, if there were Vietnamese around, you had to be very cautious.
Could you elaborate on your 2 service periods in Vietnam in terms of the months you were in country?
Well, the first time I was there for 4 months, and I came back to the States, and I was here probably about, I'm guessing 6 months, and went back. Went through staging in California and then went back. That time we flew on a commercial airliner. And that time I had no orders, which I thought was interesting. Everybody on the plane had orders except me. I had a strange MOS. Being a topographic surveyor, there were very few of us in the Marine Corps. And so I came in unassigned, and I knew from being there before that that wasn't a good thing to do, because all the Marines, their basic MOS was 0311, which is infantry rifleman. And so I was really concerned that I was going to be sent to an infantry outfit, which fortunately I wasn't. I was put back with a combat engineering outfit to use surveying, which was being an infantry outfit. But so I was sent up to Quang Tri Province, that's up on the DMZ, to Dong Ha, 11th Engineers, combat engineers. The afternoon I checked in, the warrant officer I'd gone to Vietnam the first time he was running the survey shop there. He told me, he said, I'm gonna radio around, keep places open, you pick up all your gear, said we're gonna leave at 0700 in the morning on a helicopter, and you going out to LZ Stud, you'll be out there a while. And I spent most of my second time out at LZ Stud, or Vandergrift Combat Base. It's about halfway between Dong Ha and on Route 9 and the Laotian border, not too far from the rock pile in Khe Sanh, which were kind of familiar places.
In your first deployment, would you describe yourself as being in combat, in the rear, or something else?
I wasn't in rifle shooting combat. I was primarily getting hit with rockets and mortars at night. But we're in that 155 gun battery. And we got hit about every night with rockets and mortars. Some small arms were primarily rockets and mortars.
Could you elaborate on the kind of work you did in your first as opposed to your second tour?
First tour, Tet of 68, so we were trying to do the survey work, but and we went out several times, but it became almost impossible to stand behind we were using theodolites to survey, and you're standing still looking through an optic. It's a real good way to get killed. So we basically quit that. And then when we went up to 155 guns, we primarily went up there to do artillery surveying controls, which was not near as precisely. You weren't behind an instrument for that long a period of time. And at 155 gun battery, that was probably one of the most traumatic places I was ever at. Was when a gun exploded. 155 was a very large artillery piece. Gun exploded and killed 7 or 8 Marines, and just as I got in that outfit, which was not good.
In your second deployment, would you describe yourself as being in combat, in the rear, or something else?
Much like the first time, Most of the time I was at LZ Stud or Vandergrift Combat Base, I lived in a bunker, and we got hit primarily rockets and mortars regularly. Basically, we owned it in the daylight and they owned it at dark. And if it was cloudy, low fog, misty rain, you could just sit your watch, you're gonna get hit. During the daytime, it was pretty secure, but at night, it wasn't.
And did your work differ in the second tour, or was it similar to the first?
I did primarily construction surveying the second time, laying out bridges, beach matting runways. I did a good bit of work out at Corvette. That was on the where the Dong Ha, I call it Dong Ha River, that's not the name of it, but as a river comes through Dong Ha and jumps out into the South China Sea, place that it was called Corvette. And I laid out a lot of, they were trying to put it like a R&R in-country place. I did a lot of surveying out there to facilitate that construction.
Did you learn any Vietnamese words or phrases during your tour?
None that are probably appropriate. As first, Mama San and Papa San, chop chop. I never knew what chop chop was. First, I think it was literally the first day I was in Vietnam. Walked through a village and there was an old Mama San out there with a wooden block and a meat cleaver, and I said something and she said, "Number one chop chop." And I said, what number one chop chop? And she was obviously referring to what she was what she was chopping, and I asked her what it was, and she said it was, after several exchanges, I figured out she was eating a rat. She was chopping up that rat to eat. Number one chop chop.
Wow.
The protein was very hard to come by, so if a rat got killed or a dog got run over or something, they ate it for the protein. So but that might be the only repeatable words that I learned in Vietnamese. Neither time was I really around Vietnamese very much, particularly the second time up at LZ. We had no interaction at all with locals.
You mentioned that you learned some Vietnamese words or phrases that might not be repeatable.
Right.
Are you comfortable sharing those with us?
Probably not.
How would you describe the people you served with in terms of economic background, race, or religion?
Primarily lower to middle class, primarily Caucasian, small percentage black, few Hispanic, few Puerto Ricans. Most had high school education at best. And at the end, Marine Corps was losing so many troops, they actually got to being drafted some. They were drafting some recruits that came through, or drafting some people and making them Marines and sending them to Paris. And you could see it appeared to me that they weren't of the same quality as the ones who'd volunteered. They didn't want to be there, obviously. They thought they were going to get drafted in the Army and they end up in the Marine Corps. That was not what they planned on. The primarily Christian, in most places, well, not out in the field, but most places in the Marine Corps, they'd have a service on Sundays, and you could attend, but I don't even remember one in Vietnam. I had a friend who was worked for a Catholic chaplain, and so I knew that chaplain, but I don't ever remember a religious service in Vietnam.
We're definitely going to come revisit religion.
Okay.
Do you remember any women, either Vietnamese or American, other than obviously the Mama San you mentioned earlier?
Not really. There were no women around where I was. Even, we had like a MASH unit there at LZ I was on for a long time. 9th Marines were out there, and there was an Army function there. So it was a pretty good size. I call it MASH because that's what people know from television. But, bringing in people by helicopter. But even there, I had to go up there one time. I had jungle rot real bad and had to have some surgery to cut all jungle rot off. But there were no female nurses or anything. It was all males.
To revisit faith,
Mm-hmm.
did you or anyone you served with change in terms of faith in the war zone?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think some became more agnostic, and they would say stuff like, if there was a Lord, why, if there was a Lord, why is this happening to me or to my friend or whatever? Others, they were saying you never met an atheist in a foxhole. There was some truth in that too. So you saw that change, yeah. They always laughed at me. I grew up as a Southern Baptist. I'm Presbyterian now, but we always grew up saying a blessing, and they laugh at me because I'd say quietly to myself, say grace over sea rations. And they said, you got to be joking. No way you thank anybody for this. But that's all we had to eat for 3 meals a day, so. And I was thankful. Some days we didn't have one, so then you were thankful when you got one.
Now, I know you mentioned you didn't see many Vietnamese people.
Right.
How did living in Vietnam and meeting the Vietnamese people you did meet affect you?
I thought they were in a bad situation. They were basically starving. And I could see myself, if my country had been invaded, I would fight you. And I think that's the way they saw it. Even it might be covert, very often it was. Very seldom you saw overt action. But they were friends with whoever gave them a cup of rice. That's how they were living. So I felt compassion for them. Not for the ones trying to kill me, but for wasn't everybody like that, So, and I was with a mountain yard villagers for a while, or going through and in and out of that village, and very peaceful people were just having a very difficult time living.
What do you remember about Vietnamese children?
Cute. Got a picture of one of my looking through some. In preparation, bringing you some slides, I was looking through some old pics, and I had a couple pictures of Vietnamese kids with puppies and stuff like that, and it made you want to go home. And the kids, they having a hard time, very difficult time making it. They wouldn't kill the dog, but if the dog died, they'd eat the dog.
Did you ever witness prostitution in Vietnam?
No. Did in Okinawa, but not in Vietnam. I just wasn't around them.
Did you experience any culture shock in Vietnam?
It was all culture shock. I don't know what wasn't culture shock. Having grown up in Aiken, South Carolina, and had been to probably Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida, the only place I'd ever been in my life. So yeah, everything in Vietnam was a culture shock. One of always tickled me that they couldn't understand why we would blow our nose and save it in the form of a handkerchief and put it in your pocket. They wonder why you saved that. There weren't bathrooms, so we go to the bathroom and they go side the road. So yeah, it was an all culture shock.
I know you said earlier that you had a particularly bad case of jungle rot.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about getting sick during your time in country?
Only time I really got, I had a terrible, tonsils were swollen really bad one time, and had to, that was during Ted of '68, and it was, so I got on, I couldn't be in a foxhole or a listening post at night, which I thought was pretty nice. So it was worth having to have to get a shot in your ear end every morning for penicillin. For my tonsils, it was worth it just not have to be out on the lines every night. But and other than that, I had a bad knee, and it went out one time in Vietnam. But there was nothing to do about it. I mean, eventually the swelling went down and got better. Later, I had to have it replaced. But the jungle rot was just, the water was filthy. You know, if the creek was, it was leeches in the creek, and it was filth in the creek, and I had jungle rot on my upper thighs, and they got so bad they just bleed. So that's why I went up, and it was so bad when I got up that literally you just walk in, there were people laid out being operated on, surgery for whatever's going on, and I turned around. The corpsman says, "Where are you going?" I said, I'm really not, I don't need this. And he said, "Well, they'll get to you." He said, "It works like this all the time." And so the guy came over and cut them off and sewed them up, and they got okay.
What was the treatment like for jungle rot?
From what I remember, they just took a scalpel and cut them out and sewed them up. And I guess I went back and had the stitches out. Maybe I took them out, I don't remember. It wasn't a place you wanted to go frequent. They were literally coming in almost constantly with guys all shot up.
To change topics, what was the most interesting food you ate in Vietnam?
I guess a steak, and they said it was horse. But having eaten sea rations a long time, it tasted pretty good. But the texture was a little different, so I started asking around. Somebody said, "Well, it was horse, we're getting it out of Australia." Well, that's true or not, I don't know. But it beat sea rations.
What American foods did you miss most while in Vietnam?
Saltine crackers. I'd have my mother send me saltine crackers, and I don't know why. I don't even eat them today. But I don't know if it was just the idea that back then they came in a metal box, and she could send them. A lot of times they were broke up, but that was what I really remember wanting, was saltine crackers. Have no idea why.
You talked a little bit already about animals in Vietnam. Do you remember any other distinct animals?
There were a bunch of distinct animals. There were tigers. I never personally saw one. I saw some that was shot. Water buffalo, I'd never seen a water buffalo before. The water buffalo, the kids would hang all over them. There'd be 4 or 5 kids riding a water buffalo. And if you walked out in that area, the water buffalo would charge you. So I thought that was really strange. There was something we called them rock apes. I don't really know what they were, but if you got around a river, sometimes we'd go to a river to swim, basically to bathe. And there was a kind of a monkey-looking animal, ape-looking animal that would get river rocks and go up a tree and throw them at you. I'd never seen that before. And a mongoose. I'd never seen a mongoose before. But they were on the lines. Had a bunch of guys on the lines one time, and out front was a free fire zone, so you shot anything that was out there. And that's when we shot mongoose, and it was a catamundi, I think they called it. Strange animals like that I'd never seen.
Did you have any other experiences with rats beyond the one Mama saw?
That's a really good question. Lived with the rats in our bunker. There was 3 of us lived in that bunker most of the time, and the rats were terrible, and they were the big old wolf rats. And we had big traps, but you'd have to tie them off because the rat would leave with the trap. And we took, tried to see what was the most effective way to catch them, and it came out peanut butter. The peanut butter, they couldn't get it off the trap. And so that would catch them. Which, like I said, you had to tie the trap down. And then at times, a couple times, they'd jump on me at night. You'd be sleeping, and a lot of guys got bit, and it'd bite you right at the nose where you're breathing. And then you had to take rabies shots. But when they jumped on me, I always woke up, so I'd knock them off. But the rats were biggest rats I've ever seen. They looked like a house cat. They were really big rats. Of course, there's food everywhere. I mean, you know, you dumped all the garbage, so the rats lived in the garbage. Good questions. I hadn't thought about those in many a year.
Thank you. Did you ever see Vietnamese civilians collecting or using American trash?
No. I saw them. They weren't supposed to. We had military payment certificates. We weren't allowed to use U.S. dollars, and they weren't supposed to have anything but their currency, which is the Vietnamese dong. But they would have, I guess, black market trading. I was not involved with, but at times they would have military payment certificate. So I remember a couple times while I was there, they would issue new payment certificate unannounced. So where a $20 MPC, it was purple, now it was green or yellow or something. Well, you'd always get hit those nights because all those people who got rich on military payment certificate, now they couldn't, it was worthless, which I thought was interesting. Somebody thought that through.
Would you say you personally encountered the Viet Cong?
Yeah. And then I've met two of them going back as well, two guys I didn't personally confront in battle, but they were Viet Cong, and I met them later on when I visited Vietnam, 2 different occasions. I met individual Viet Cong people. We got along fine. There was no animosity at all.
Do you remember seeing Agent Orange being sprayed?
Yeah. Yeah, it's, you know, we'd have a road like Route 9, which is the main route from Dong Ha, which is over almost on the South China Sea, over to the Laotian border. And that was a main thoroughfare east-west. And bulldozers would push back, and then they'd spray Agent Orange as well. Yeah. Saw a lot of it sprayed.
Were you concerned at all at the time about Agent Orange?
We didn't know anything about it. You know, I have a good friend now who was in the Air Force at the time, and he said he was loading Agent Orange on planes. That was his job at times, and he was covered with it. Well, now he's got a lot of the Agent Orange effects, dying with it.
What were some of the ways you coped with the war?
Laugh a lot. Give you an example. You do things just to pretend you're not there. I came up to a Marine one time, I don't even know where I was, somewhere not my normal place, and it was a guy there, and it was a rear area, they had a mess hall. And so I asked him what time it was, and he looked at his watch. I didn't have a watch, and he gave me some time, and it had to be about 1700, 1730, something like that. And he gave me some time, like 10 o'clock in the morning. I said, that can't be right. He said, yeah, that's right. And looked, and I said, it can't be. He said, this is Tennessee time. This is all a real bad effing dream, and when I wake up, I want to be on the right time. So you saw a lot of that, just whatever it took to cope. You have to.
Do you remember any other examples of humor or slang or jokes or pranks being a part of life in Vietnam?
All the time. I mean, it was just constant. You know, that was the stress reliever. Pull pranks on each other. I was telling you, I had like 12 bunkers out on the lines, the free fire zone in front of us, and my guys, I put them out like, I don't know, we had like 4-hour shifts, so it was like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. or something. So my guys had the first shift and then the last shift. So we went around and picked them up one morning. Well, one guy calls and he says, I want to fire one round down here. And you always cleared that, because if you start shooting, everybody starts shooting. And so I got on the radio and told him, yeah, that's good. So he shot a pheasant, and we cooked the pheasant. But I went to pick up the guys one morning, and real foggy, and got out to one of these bunkers, and sitting behind an M60 machine gun, it looks like long blonde hair. And I'm thinking, this can't be. Yeah, it was the USO show had been put on for the Army back there, and some of the girls had come spent the night with a couple of my guys on the bunker. So you had this blonde girl sitting behind a machine gun. She was Australian. And anything to relieve the tension. They said, what are you going to do? I said, congratulate them. You know, what am I going to do with them? You know, but it was always something going on to try to just relieve the stress. We cooked on, we're supposed to get heat tabs with C rations. That's a little round tablet you touch a match to and it heats your food. Well, we never had them. So we'd take a claymore mine apart, make a little ball, roll it in the sand, and set a can over, make sure you open the can first, and set it off. That's how we'd heat food. It's adapting, just make it easier.
Did you have any other memorable experiences with free fire zones?
Yeah, I mean, typically where I was, there was always an area designated free fire. I mean, there was nobody supposed to be there. I was walking point one time, and all I saw was black outfit and something swinging over, and my first reaction was to shoot, but then something caused me to pause, and I still don't know what. But it was an old woman out there with a hoe, and it was in a free fire zone. I still don't know why I didn't shoot her. I'm thankful I didn't shoot her, but we ran her off. But you know, why she would have even been out there? She went through concertina wire, and there were claymore mines, and you know, should not have been out there, but they were out there.
While you were in country, were you aware of any active duty military personnel who opposed the war?
No, I was not.
What was the most memorable friendship you had during your time in Vietnam?
A guy who died recently lived in Kentucky. We went to Vietnam twice. First time we went over it together. Second time I ended up in the same bunker that I talked about with the rats with him. So we spent a lot of time together. We played poker at night. He would lose his money or typically he would get mad because we quit playing poker, and he'd burn his money, so then the next day I'd loan him money so we could play poker again the next night. But it was just a comedy. But I called him Toad. First time we 155 guns, we got hit. That was the first time we really got hit with hard. And we were in a bunker. He went running out of the bunker. And I thought, we'll never see him again, and alive. And a few minutes later, he dove back in the bunker, and after things settled down, I asked him, where did you go? He said, and he reached in his flak jacket pocket and pulled out kind of a petrified toad frog, how they'll draw up. He said, I picked that up out in the field today, and said, as long as I keep him alive. I said, he's not alive now. He said, well, he's kinda. I'm gonna be okay, he's gonna take care of me. We came back to from Vietnam with that toad. He went back about 6 weeks before I did, 2 months. I got that bunker, he still had that toad. When I left to come back to the States, he still had that toad. I ran him down 30, 40 years later, And first thing I asked him, is he still half-toed? And he said, no, the old thing fell apart. But he was an interesting guy from Camelsville, Kentucky.
What was his name?
Roscoe Skaggs. No middle name. Bright guy, but grew up in the wrong place.
What was the most beautiful thing you saw in Vietnam?
The scenery was incredible. It's a beautiful country. The mountains were lush and beautiful. The rivers were gorgeous. The Vietnamese young women who were part French were gorgeous. They were really pretty. The older women, they chewed, we called it betel nut. Betel nut as a painkiller for teeth, and their teeth were rotted out and they'd have black gums. But those young girls that had French in them were really pretty. And the South China Sea, like at China Beach, it's a beautiful, beautiful coastline. A beautiful country.
What was the worst thing you saw in Vietnam?
Those guys getting blown up with that 155 gun. There were literally body parts everywhere, and literally parts. And so most of the day was spent picking up body parts in sandbags. That was the worst thing I saw. I mean, just an accident. It wasn't enemy fire or nothing. The gun breech block didn't lock, and it blew back on them. Killed all of them, but I think it was 7 in the gun altogether. Killed 6 of them instantly, and one caught up front. He basically was on fire. They got him out. He lived like 20 days, but sure those were not good 20 days.
Did you expect to survive the war?
Not the second time. The first time I was a novice enough to think, yeah. But after that, you'd seen enough to know that there was a lot of people getting killed. And so the second time, I didn't dwell on it. I didn't fear dying. I just didn't want to we called it getting screwed up. You know, a lot of guys would get Willie Pete or white phosphorus on them, or napalm, or, you know, really, they'd been better off dead. So I didn't fear the death. I feared the other, and was very, very, very fortunate.
Was it then common in your experience for U.S. soldiers to get hit with napalm or white phosphorus?
It wasn't common, but it was not abnormal. It would happen. I mean, if you call in air support and it's off a little bit, it gets on you. But you would see people like that, yeah. It was, and you didn't want any part of that. Being shot was a whole lot better than that.
Who did you write to or receive letters from when you were in Vietnam?
I wrote my mother. I said my father had died, and my brother and sister were still at home. So I wrote my mother when I could. I had an uncle who was my daddy's brother, who wrote me fairly regularly in Vietnam, and I responded. A lot of times we didn't have any way to respond. Remember one time I was on a boat going down the river to Corvette, and the mail bags were on there where water was coming over the boat, so all the letters were getting ruined, and I thought, well, that's why we don't get mail. But mail was a big deal. It was always good to get mail.
Do you remember any American songs from your time in Vietnam?
Yeah, the Armed Forces radio, when you could pick it up, played American music. In fact, one time, it was the first time I was in Vietnam with 11th Marines, And Armed Forces Radio would pick up like a local back stateside radio show, and it was WBBQ in Augusta. They used to say WBBQ Tiger Radio, and that played as I was walking by, and I said, whoa, that's home, you know. But so when you could get a radio and get reception, the typical songs of that period, 68, 69, 70s, there's a lot of British influence there in the music.
What was your most expensive or frequent purchase at the PX?
We didn't have PXs. I mean, around Da Nang we had a PX at Freedom Hill. You could actually buy a car and have it sent. You could pick it up when you got home. But other than that, I was never where we had a PX. I would hold out $30 a month, send the rest to my mom. And basically, there was nothing to buy. That was to play poker with or something, I mean.
What was R&R like, and where did you go?
The only R&R I ever got was I was sent out to a heavy cruiser for I think 3 or 4 days off the coast. It was firing into North Vietnam, and you know, basically they actually had ice cream, they had air conditioning, they had a television, but I wasn't comfortable out there. It was strange because it was large ship and it was firing, and where I'd been, when something fired, if it was outgoing or incoming, real quick you knew the difference. But that ship would fire, and I kept saying, if they shoot back us up, I don't have a hole to get in. So it was a strange feeling. I mean, they were secure because they were off the coast, but it was I wasn't comfortable out there in it. It was good to get a hot bath and that kind of stuff, but that was the only R&R I ever got. Flew out on a helicopter, spent I think 3 or 4 days, and then came back.
When did you go to Okinawa?
Went through Okinawa twice. First time from Da Nang, that 20-man detachment I was with, we went back through Okinawa. We were there 3 or 4 days before we caught a plane back. And then the second time I went back to Okinawa, I was up on the DMZ, very close. And when Nixon announced to pull out of Marines from Vietnam, they pulled off the senior people off the DMZ first, and got on a ship in Da Nang and went to Okinawa. Spent my 21st birthday on LST, which is a landing type ship, flat bottom. We got on the edge of a typhoon. It was taking incredible rolls. Even the sailors were sick. But yeah, I spent my 21st birthday coming out of Vietnam the second time on that LST. And I spent probably about 2 months in Okinawa that time before I came back to the States. And once I got in the States, I went up to Cherry Point. I had no orders again. The orders were called Marine Corps headquarters in Washington. So I called, and this guy answers the phone, and he said, what's your MOS? And he got my service number, and he said, your MOS is 1443? I said, yeah. He said, what am I going to do with that? I said, I don't know. He said, where you want to go? I said, Buford, Marine Corps Air Station, Buford. He said, nobody on the whole base got that MOS. I can't send you there. I said, how about an air wing? He said, hold on. He said, Cherry Point, I can send you there. So I went up to Cherry Point, and I was there. I was training NCO there for a while, and got an early out. They took people who had I forget how many months in country and so many months left to do, and they let us out.
That's the end of my service questions.
Okay.
Is there another story we haven't talked about from your time in Vietnam that you'd like to share?
Nothing comes to mind. Did a good job.
Let's talk about your post-service life. What relationship in your life was most changed by your service?
I learned there were a lot of things I never wanted to do again. It almost made me a pacifist. I find war hawks are people who've never, I shouldn't say absolute, this is not an absolute statement, but the people who are gung-ho are people basically, they've never seen it. And so it made me basically pass this. I had an old Volkswagen bus for years I drove around. I worked for the Department of Revenue in upper management and had a Volkswagen bus. And that always brought comments. But, one time I worked at the Department of Revenue, I retired there, and they interviewed me, a guy who did our PR stuff, interviewed me for Marine Corps birthday, and he said, Ken said, tell me, he was a Marine and he'd been in Vietnam. We didn't know each other at the time. And he said, tell me how you would describe Vietnam. I says, an exercise in futility that thousands of people got killed and we accomplished nothing. So I think that's what it left with me.
When did you transition to being more of a pacifist?
More and more the longer initially I didn't talk about Vietnam at all. My wife didn't even hear it. Thermostat would click in the house and I'd jump up, or a pine cone would hit a roof and I'd holler incoming and this kind of stuff. But and it was obviously PTSD, I didn't know what it was. But I think that the older I got, probably the more pacifist I've become. But I think it all goes back to the Vietnam experience. I'm not naive enough to think that some people don't need to be removed from the gene pool, because I think they do. I think they're dangerous. I mean, I can't say we were wrong to get rid of Hitler, but I think if we can avoid a conflict, we should avoid a conflict.
Did you take any actions against the war after you got home?
No, I often told people if it happened 5 years later, I'd have probably gone to Canada. We accomplished nothing. And the times I've been back to Vietnam, you see it still with those people. It's hard to find anyone my age in Vietnam. And you still see kids going around, particularly in Laos, with blown off legs because of the mines we left there. And we still got them there. So yeah, I don't know what we accomplished with that.
Did you join Vietnam Veterans Against the War?
No, my wife told me I want to join her. And that's probably true. I don't join much of anything. I enjoy people, but I'm not a joiner.
Could you tell me about veterans rap groups you participated in?
Yeah, it's for PTSD treatment through the VA. You know, I got some help out of it. I think everybody deals with it differently. Some people really it's almost excited about talking about, well, when this happened and this happened, and you know, some people almost dwell in that was the high point of their life, and it wasn't the high point of my life. So I only did it a few times. I didn't really find it helpful. Some people did, and I admire them that was their way out, but that's wasn't my way of dealing with it. But I've gotten good service from the VA, and I know they catch a lot of grief, but I go to the CBOC clinic, that community outreach clinic here in Aiken, and then the main hospitals, you know, got 2 large hospitals in Augusta. But I get good service out of the VA. I have no complaints out of them. I mean, it's a very large bureaucracy, but you can go to any VA anywhere in the country, and you show them you got a card, you lay it, they scan it, and instantly they know everything that's ever happened to you. And our other medical system, you go to one doctor, they don't know what the other doctor did, and they don't know what the other one did, and it's just such a hodgepodge. And the VA, from my perspective, has that part down.
After Vietnam, where did you go to college?
I went to University of South Carolina on GI Bill. My wife was her last semester in college, as a bachelor's degree, and my first. So, and she got a job teaching in Aiken. So I went to USC Aiken, Banksia, as long as I could. It was just a 2-year school at the time. Then I transferred to Augusta College, and I only took the courses there that the business school at Carolina approved. So I got them to approve them before I took them at Augusta College, just to avoid that commute. And then I finished at Carolina in Columbia.
So in other words, you went to the original USC Aiken.
I did. It was a lot of fun. Really small, yeah, just good local people. It was fun. I work out at the gym here at USC Aiken here, and I find the students great. You know, it's a good school. And I was in the other day, and the guy at the desk, I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Spain." I said, "Where?" He said, "Madrid." I said, "You got some great museums." He said, "We have some good artists."
What years were you in college?
Graduated in December of '74. So I went to summer school and all that to get it through as soon as I could. So I don't know exactly when, but I graduated December '74.
What did you expect on campus as a Vietnam veteran?
I felt a good bit of resentment from the staff, instructors and professors. A couple of them were very anti-war, and at that point, I was not pro-war, but I didn't want to be treated like I had done something wrong. And several of them overtly were very much opposed to anyone who'd served.
Who, since the war, have you talked to about Vietnam?
For years, no one. As I get older, I guess, more talkative. Occasionally friends. I never joined the Marine Corps League or anything like that. So really just a handful of people, probably. You probably know more about my history in Vietnam than anybody other than my wife did.
Have you been to the wall in D.C.?
Have not been to D.C. a number of times, but I've not been to the wall.
Why not?
I'll recognize some of the names. I just soon not read them.
What do you think of it as a monument?
From what I've seen pictures of, I think it's a beautiful monument. I've been to the World War II memorial there, which is, I thought, very nicely done as well. But it's a beautiful piece of work. It's just I don't want to read the names.
Do you remember it being controversial?
Yeah, you know, if I remember right, a Vietnamese woman architect designed it. It seems like that or something. But yeah, I remember some controversy around it, but nothing particularly. But it seemed like a Vietnamese sculptor, or I guess the right word would be sculptor, it's so big, but I think it was a Vietnamese woman.
She was an Asian American.
Asian American, okay. Which I thought was fitting. I like the Asian cultures.
Have you been back to Vietnam?
Been back 3 times. There twice as a Marine. I've been back 3 times as civilian. Twice just kind of a tourist. I went back the first time. I wanted to go to see some of the places I'd seen before, and I did. And overall, I enjoyed it. It was helpful. Then another time we were vacationing, went again. Didn't go to those places again. Just did different things. And then the last time I went a couple of years ago, we built some housing for out of Hanoi with Habitat for Humanity.
When did you first go back to Vietnam?
Probably about 15 years ago. I can't come up with a date, but flew into Phu Bai, which I thought was interesting. That's where 155 guns were. I'd flown into that same airport. It looked a little different back in '68, and spent some time in Phu and then went on up into Hue. Hue's a beautiful city, very historic city.
Why did you want to go back for Habitat for Humanity?
I'd always told my wife that it was a beautiful country, and it is. So I wanted two reasons. I wanted to show her a beautiful country, and I wanted to visit those places that those LZs and stuff I'd been on. And we had a really good guide, and when we checked in a little hotel in Hanoi, it's called the Charming, and it was like $17 a night for their deluxe rooms. It's still very inexpensive. And so I asked the young woman at the desk, she spoke quite good English, and I told her what I wanted to do, and I said, do you have somebody that you can line up to let me go to these sites? And she said, I have a book. So I picked out the things in the book where I wanted to go and added some things, and she said, are you sure you're up to this? You're pretty old, you know. And I went to laugh, and I said, yeah, I know I'm pretty old. I said, well, I was here during the Vietnam War. Do you know the Vietnam War? She said, yeah, I know the Vietnam War. I said, I watched, I forgot some movie, you know. And I said, oh, well, that's your knowledge of it. Yeah, no knowledge of it at all, you know. So, which makes it good. Makes it real good. And my wife continued to keep up with her, the young woman. We went back to Vietnam, she was working at a different hotel. We stayed with her at that other hotel. And then since then, she's gotten married to a guy from France, and she lives in France.
What was it like talking to the former member of the Viet Cong that you met?
The first one, we had a guide, a woman that worked at the hotel, and I told her I wanted to go out in the countryside, and she said, you were here during the war? And I said, yeah. And she said, I have somebody you'd like to meet. So we went to this guy's house, and I mean, he didn't know I was coming or anything. And as soon as I walked in, there was a Marine Corps pack on the wall, and I thought, whoa, I hadn't seen a Marine Corps pack in years. It was like really shocking. And our packs were different than the Army, and so we started talking, and she was translating, and but he said, you know, he was a young man, and he was with Viet Cong, and he was down near Saigon. He was in the lower part of the country, and I was up on the DMZ. But it was interesting. It was absolutely no hostilities. We hugged each other. I asked him about the pack that was on the wall, and he said his brother had been in the Viet Cong too, and he'd gotten killed. But the pack came from his brother, so I don't know, the story behind it. But just a good way to let old people heal. But both of them were really good guys.
What did you do specifically with Habitat for Humanity?
We did a number of bills all over a number of countries, but we were in Vietnam. We were building basically a concrete block house for a family. Man and his wife, I think they had 2 kids, 2 boys. Beautiful area, beautiful rice paddy, beautiful setting. My wife worked on a different house, but with Habitat, what we were doing was we were just doing what I call grunt work. They really wanted you there for your money, and to show that there was people outside of that area that was interesting in helping. It was a very good relationship. We did Vietnam, Armenia, Jordan, Kyrgyzstan, maybe 1 or 2 other countries.
This is my last question.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite book, poem, or movie about Vietnam?
No. I can't think of it. I even bought the Ken Burns series on Vietnam, and I never made it through it. It was too real.
Do you have a least favorite?
I don't watch war movies. I read a good bit of history. History, but my wife used to say it wasn't helping, but the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, but I've never read a Vietnam War book.
Okay. Well, Mr. Pervis, thank you so much for talking
Well,
with us
thank you.
and sharing
I appreciate
your
it.
stories.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much.